Hi, this is Janet Fitch, and it is noon on Wednesday, Pacific, 3 o'clock Eastern, and that means it is Writing Wednesday, where I answer your writing questions, psychological questions in the comments section, or if you have questions for me in between Wednesdays, send them to me through my website, janetfitchwrites.com, and I can design a Writing Wednesday around. Hey, this clearly we're going to have a little bit of connectivity problems. I don't know why. I don't ask why. Life is life. And here at the end of the food chain, we just go with it. I know some of you live in the country, so, a little disruption of whatever. Uh, people go nuts because their internet is slow or whatever. But, come on. Nobody's going to die. Um, so, anyway, as you might know, I am currently in the grips of a creative obsession with the musician, producer, genius, avant-garde innovator, Brian Eno. I'm on an Eno kick, and I saw a film last night, a generative documentary about Eno, which I probably wouldn't have even noticed, except that I am currently obsessed with Eno. So that's something that I just wanted to start with, is the sheer kind of magnetic power of creative obsession. That when you are excited about something, someone, something, ideas, a book. Oh, Elisa bought the book. Yeah, it's the 1995 diary of Brian Eno. And you really get a look at his attitudes about creativity, how he feeds his creativity, just how much energy he has, how much energy he expends in the average day. I give him props for that. I certainly don't have that kind of energy, but it's inspiring. The just thinking different and thinking so clearly about things he's seeing. Not, there's the whole thing of judgment clouds observation. You look around and you see, somebody who's dressed weirdly, or you see somebody who's not picking up their trash, or you see people who are running their dogs in the no dogs park. It's hard to distance yourself from that judgment, to observe without judgment. Hi, Jill. You see things, you hear things, you see something on the street. Hi, Brittany. You see something and you see it more clearly. Hi, Bozena, if you can restrain the judgment and just allow yourself to see what's in the moment. As you walk through the world with your little notebook, as I suggest, kept a diary for sure. See what ideas, see what you're actually observing. Be a little more open to the world. But cultivating obsession is so wonderful, because there's a magic to that kind of attention, that you return and return and return to things. It magnetizes I'm a Qigong practitioner, so for me, I think of it as magnetizing the Qi field. When you are interested in something, it magnetizes the field, and then things start moving towards you that relate to that. If anybody is just become interested in anything, you'll notice that more things start coming to you. People who are interested in that start coming to you. Yeah, the name of the book is The Year of with Swollen Appendices, which is sort of disgusting. But it's a diary from Eno's diary from 1995. And then there's a section that's pink that's small, short essays. So that's the swollen appendices. Very clever. But you'll notice when you become obsessed with something, or even somewhat interested in something, the universe starts coughing up more of what you are interested in. And you can say that if you're not operating on the spiritual level, you would just say you're just noticing. You start to notice things that would have escaped you before. Because I'm a little bit of a magician, a magical thinker or whatever, I feel it more as or energizing the chi field, as vibrating the world around you. Hi, Wendy. And Eno, I came across this book, The Year of Swollen Appendices, the 1995 Eno diary, just at visiting a bookstore. There's a local kind of spiritual center called the Philosophical Research Society, which is very old school. I mean, it's been there since the 1920s, and they get in early. They get these really nice pieces of real estate, these older spiritual groups. And so it's a wonderful place with a terrific bookstore that has like tarot cards and, that kind of stuff. And I saw this book, Diary 1995, Brian Eno. And, I'd heard of Eno, and it was it was kind of a little less airy than some of the other offerings in there. And I'm waiting for a show. So I go in, I open the book, and what I start seeing is so intelligent, so well, just thinking different, full of events, full of, talk to David, he's working on a Bowie album, talk to David, David said this, something really interesting. Not just we hung out and had beers, but the level of creative exchange, it's on a very high level. They're really thinking about interesting issues and personalities and ways of describing the world. I've just been absolutely obsessed. My copy now is, I can't read it that fast because I'm writing all over it. And I write in my books, and I suggest you have a conversation with your books as you go along. Mark them up, so you can go back and find that passage again, or you can write your own reactions. Do you think that's true? Do you think that's not true? It's like, nope. So I've been very actively involved with Eno, a personality that I never gave two thoughts to before. I use when I do writing for the senses, I do use his saw music from Another Green World, just because it's highly irritating. But I never gave him a thought. I certainly thought about Bowie and Roxy Music and, many of the musical groups and acts and singers that he has worked with, but not this central figure, because he doesn't really play much of anything. Ambient music, fine, but it never occurred to me to ask, why do all of these amazingly creative people work with that guy? And as I'm reading his diary and then seeing the documentary last night, it's like, oh, because he adds something to the broth that wouldn't have been there. He has big ideas. He challenges these artists, and he's an advocate for lateral thinking. So when he works with an artist, he makes sure that they're not doing more of the same. When people choose to work with Eno, they want to be challenged. And as artists, as writers, don't we want to be challenged? Do we want to just write the same old crap that everybody's writing so our books are indistinguishable from 1,000 other books similar to them? For myself, I'm always looking for a new idea. I'm always looking to move laterally, to do something else. When I was working with Kate Braverman, who thinks different, way different, she always used to say, writing is the opposite of the Family Feud, where if you, even on the word choice level, if 99 out of 100 people would say, use this word in this place in the sentence, that's the one you shouldn't use. Always be surprising, always think different, always stop and think, what is it really? What is it really? What's fresh? What haven't I ever seen before? So that's avoiding the cliche on the sentence level. But there's a cliche embedded in almost everything if you think about it. So how do you get away from cliched thinking? Even if it's just repeating what you did before, it's already a cliche because it's been done. So working with Eno really inspires these people to do something different. And that's why, people like Laurie Anderson or, Lou Reed or Bowie or U2, why are, Talking Heads, why are they working with this guy? Because he's the one who keeps them doing something new. He can challenge them. So Wendy says, I checked out both books you recommended, the Eno book and Linnell George's book about Octavia Butler, who also thought different, right? Both great, she says. Oh, good, Wendy. I'm glad you did that. So anyway, what I'm working my way around to about the Eno is, first, how a creative obsession. Oh, Coldplay, Bozena said that today he's working with Coldplay. He challenges them to stay fresh so that, he is in his 70s now, and the lively intelligence of this guy, just refusing the cliche and trying randomness. He was strongly affected by John Cage, who was an avant-garde composer, I guess you'd call him, who worked with randomness. So he's sort of in the same era as the great performance artists coming up. He was part of that early work where you walked the streets of New York and you worked with found materials. Cage did that with sound. Like, he has a piece that I'm actually using in my new novel that's a silence. It's silence 4 minutes and 22 seconds or something like that. And what it is a frame. It gives a frame to external reality. So once you put a frame around a piece of randomness, it's no longer random because it's been framed as a piece of art. And you listen to the sound that he's hearing or you're hearing during that silence, and that's the peace. So Cage is a very important influence on Eno, and an important influence psychologically on artists and writers. That, and Eno talks about this in his diary, that framing is very important. And I've been thinking a lot about that. It's not so important the content, which of course it is important, but we tend to focus on the content. And pay more attention to creating a frame for work, a framework, say, so that it breaks the conventional presentation, and inspires you to do something else. What you put in that frame, and thinking of the framing rather than of what, when you try to express what you're trying to say, a narrative, that we're fiction writers, so we're talking about narrative. When you think of the frame rather than the narrative, the conventional chronological frame, you start thinking, well, what else could I do? I'm thinking about this now. What else could I do besides tell a story from front to back, in time, and with me pretty close to the subject time, pretty continuous time. What else could I do? If I think of the frame rather than the content, it opens up such new ideas. And so when we're talking about lateral thinking, that's for Eno and the people who work with him, the people who pay him the big bucks to work with them, the most interesting, creative people in the world, some of them. What are they paying him for? Is to break them out of the simplistic, close at hand idea and into thinking of a different frame. He's very painterly too. He looks at like we need more sky. Like he'll be talking about music that he's mixing, and he'll go, I saw that in the documentary last night, this needs more sky. And that means something to him. And so he'll rearrange things. He talks about, in the diary, he talks about working with a singer, and I can't remember who it was. It was somebody famous. And saying the problem with singers is they want to fill the whole thing. They always want to be singing. They're not leaving space. So there's not as much dynamics in the music, because there's that singer always wants to sing. So it becomes a little too uniform to really be interesting and have those dynamics of the silence. And boy, when I was doing Chinese brush painting, they emphasized the inclusion of its yin and yang. And yang is like the singing. It's like the manifested, the bright object, Whereas in Chinese brush painting, you have to remember to have yin, which is uncertain, misty, blank, leaving blank paper in your brush painting. Its yin is water, so you can put a stream in, which breaks the painting apart. You can have clouds if there's no water. I live in Southern California. There often is no water, so you put mist, and it causes you to leave some of the paper blank. And I have a terrible time with that. I'm like a singer. I want to fill the whole thing with yang, with the stuff that exists, right? Picture. I want to pack it, and I do the same thing with my fiction. And now I'm thinking, okay, how do you put more yin in this? How do you leave space So you can have dynamics. You can have, the rise and fall. You can have that which is filled in and that which is left simple or empty. The simple and the complex gives you somewhere to go. So that was really interesting. This documentary, I've got to say, was so inspiring because no two screenings will be the same. He's all about, Eno is a lot about random generation of ideas, as Cage was, leaving some things up to chance. And that causes lateral thinking because there's a game and there's things you can do and things that you can't do. And it takes you in a new direction that you wouldn't have embraced on your own. So in this film, it's not really one film. This guy had like 500 hours of Eno footage from all the years of, people taking film of Eno. And he worked with the archive for like 2 years digitizing. And then he's worked on software, the filmmaker, a guy named Gary Hustwit. He took the footage and he developed software that randomizes inclusion of various scenes and clips from that vast library so that every time you see the film, it's going to be different. And that just, it's like, wow. I saw it and I realized, oh, I'm only seeing like 20% or, 2% of the film that's there. He bookends with two sequences that he wants in there every time. So it's bookended, and then there's a sequence in there with Bowie that's just too good. And that's in there every time. So 25% of it is stable, and 75% of it is completely randomized for the screening that you are watching. So if I had stayed for the late show, I would have seen a different film. And if I had come back tonight, I would be seeing a different film. Evidently, it was shown at the Venice Biennale. A week of it, continuous, was shown with this random generation. And it continued overnight when nobody was watching it. That would have been amazing to see. So keep an eye out. It's screening all, this guy is like touring it like a band. So watch for go to his site, Gary what's his name? Hustwit, Hustwit. And, take a look at where it's coming. I think the next places in America are going to be on the East Coast, Boston, Philadelphia, maybe Pennsylvania somewhere, and Florida. And then it goes to Europe, and it just travels around. And I'm sure more things are going to be happening with this. So just keep an eye out. But I want to talk about lateral thinking. One of the things that Eno created with, who was he creating it with? Let's see if I can remember. It was Eno and somebody else, somebody that creative, that they created a deck of cards, and it was their wood, I guess, the original ones, of what they call oblique strategies. And there's actually an oblique strategies generator online that I just pulled up. It's on, I think you can get to it through Eno's website. And you can pick a random card. Let's see, I'm going to turn this around and hopefully you can see this on on my computer, though it'll probably be reversed, as these things sometimes are. There. Oh, it's not reversed. Oblique strategies. And this is a random card. So this is what, if they were in the studio and not coming up with anything too interesting, they would pick a card from the pack. So I'm going to pick one right now. And I get cluster analysis. So it's like a prompt, cluster analysis. So now I'm thinking about cluster analysis. Okay, so if I'm a fiction writer, imagine I'm a fiction writer, cluster analysis. What would I do with that? Cluster analysis. You know, you've seen my word prompts, which are just verbs, noun verbs, short words that, you know, for two page short. So you've seen that. That's sort of random, where you pick the card out of my little thing of words for a prompt, you know, like I just picked one, stick. So you write 2 pages double space using the word stick in there. But this is much more sophisticated. These are mental concepts. So cluster analysis. So what does that mean to me? So what does cluster mean? Besides a clusterfuck. So if I have a character and I get cluster analysis, I might be thinking about some kind of groups and having thoughts about that group. I might have a cluster of objects and then think about what they have to do with each other. Like, you know, I remember there are, you know, going through your mother's purse or something, there are sites where they talk about what celebrities have in their purse. They dump out their purse and they see what's in there. So I could see writing something about that, cluster analysis. What's in her purse? What's in my purse? You know, what's in his purse? I'm going to pick another one from this. I'll show you I'm being honest about this. So here's another one. This is from Eno's website, enoweb.co.uk. So here's another random card. You know, I'm bored. I'm hating what I'm writing. I'm bored with it. It just seems so conventional. Let's pick a card. It is quite possible, after all, is what it says. This is not focusing very well, but I think that's really interesting. So it's just a line. It is quite possible, after all. So what would that mean if I'm writing a scene? You know, I could have the character saying, no, this can't be, and the character realizing, oh no, it is quite possible, after all, to make friends with this person, to walk out of the room, to dump my bowl of soup on his head, you know, to do something else. These are wonderful. Here's one called Go Outside, Shut the Door. Outside of what? And what does it mean to shut the door? I mean, these are wonderful. The idea, though, is to cultivate lateral thinking. Find ways to approach something differently. And you can have your character do it, or you can do it as the creator. Use it as a metaphor. I like, prompts and games are a wonderful way to inspire lateral thinking. I know everybody is has heard me talk about Life a User's Manual by Georges Perec, P-E-R-E-C, which is nothing but games. He was a member of a group called Oulipo, O-U-L-I-P-O, Oulipo. And that's all games. It's writing from restrictions, like the five, what do they call it? The five obstructions. There was a film where the filmmaker got money. How does it go? The filmmaker was awarded money to make a film, but they had to do or not. They had five things that they had to do or couldn't do to make the film. And let's see what I can find about the five obstructions. Five Obstructions is a Danish documentary film directed by Lars von Trier and Jürgen Leth. And the premise is that von Trier had to create a challenge for his friend and mentor, another filmmaker. And it's things they had to do 5 times, each time with a different obstruction. And one was that the partner had to remake the film in Cuba with no set, no shot lasting longer than 12 frames, and must answer the questions posed in the original film. Then the second film, Leth must remake the film in the worst place in the world, but not show that place on screen. Additionally, Leth must himself play the role of the man. The meal must be included, but the woman is not to be included. He remakes the film in the red light district of Mumbai, partially hiding it behind a translucent screen. This is a really good film if you've never seen the Five Obstructions. 3, because Leth failed to complete the second task perfectly, von Trier punishes him, telling to either remake the film in any way he chooses or repeat it again with a second obstruction in Mumbai. Leth chooses the first option and remakes the film in Brussels using a split screen effects. Then, number 4, Leth must remake the film as a cartoon. He does so with the aid of a specialist in rotoscoping, and creates animated versions of shots from the previous films. As such, the final product is technically an animation, but not a cartoon. Nevertheless, von Trier considers the task to be completed successfully. And then the 5th obstruction is that von Trier has already made the 5th version, but it must be credited as Leth's, and Leth must read a voice-over narration, ostensibly from his own perspective, but in fact written by von Trier. And it was so inspiring as to the way you create much more original art from a random prompt or from out of extreme obstruction or limitation than you would if you had all the time and money in the world. Eno talks about that in his diaries, saying that when people have too much money, they solve problems with money instead of with innovation. That the most innovative work in music and in art, the other arts, often comes out of poverty, that you just make do and you come up with really interesting solutions because you can't just buy your way out of it. So when people are suggesting, if only I had all the time in the world to write that book, if only I was supported, if only I didn't have a straight job, if only I didn't, have these restrictions on my life, to realize that often under the pressure of the obstruction, of the limitation of the $5,000 to make a film instead of $5 million, you come up with more interesting solutions. You beg for help. You get help from strange quarters. You're forced out of what's comfortable and easy into what's much more interesting. Traveling. I know that Eno was writing, he had gone somewhere and they'd put him up in some, extremely expensive hotel. And he just thought it was so boring because there's no need for creativity. There's no need to seek out something interesting and different. When when you don't have a lot of money, if you're a traveler, you know this already. If you don't have a lot of money, you seek out interesting places that aren't that expensive and you're in there with interesting people who have also sought out something that, something that isn't that expensive but is really interesting. So the people are more interesting, the places are more interesting, the experience is more interesting. You think, oh God, if only I could travel first class and stay in the fancy place and, eat in the fancy places. I mean, that's traveling. But in fact, the people are so boring because they're just buying their experience instead of creating their experience. So instead of whining about our lack of finances, to realize that is pressure to do something creative and original. Melissa says, that's so true. Some of the most random prompts I've been given have helped me create the best essays, and I've wrote them quickly because I felt so inspired. Zunaid says, nothing lasting was ever created without limitation. Well, that's interesting. I wonder who is that a quote from yourself, or was that something you've read? I like it. Wendy says the 5 obstructions could definitely be done with a short story. Yeah, absolutely could be. And then if you look at, I was mentioning Life a User's Manual from Georges Perec, the guy from Oulipo, and that book is all rules, all obstructions. It's broken down. You can see it online. You can look this up, but it's like the things that each scene has to have, can't have, that it has like position, activation, citation, so quotes from 2 authors, that has to have a number of people in it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. It has to have, oh my God, it has to have color. It has to have furniture, a different kind of sofa in each scene, a different epoch referred to, a different style, a different length, a different age and sex. I mean, take a look at this. An element of clothing. I mean, it's amazing. It just goes on and on. There's like 42 rules or 42 categories that have to be adhered to in Life a User's Manual. It's exceptional. You could do that in your novel. I thought about that. Just like every novel has to have its color. I usually do it with character, but like each scene could have its own scent. I usually do that with character. Each character has their own scent, their own color, their own music, their own, style of clothing or the way they walk, or, a lot of that has to do with characterization. I really like that. But I never thought, different furniture, because often they return to the same rooms. So it would be, interesting to move that room, move that conversation. So Jill says, where does the obsessive aspect come in? Okay, the obsessive aspect, cultivating obsession. Remember when you were a kid and you were just obsessed with so many things? You're obsessed with a band. You listen to them over and over and over again. And the lyrics come into your head and you start meeting, you see which of your friends can be really into that. And there's a liveliness and more, it's not even zest, but it's more than zest. There's such energy when you find yourself captivated by something, when you have a crush on someone. It brings a liveliness into your daily life that as we age, we tend to age out of that. Oh, good for you. Melissa says, I still do that. Good. I'm glad you do. I don't do it as much as I used to. I don't have a crush on some lead singer of a band. I don't have, I tend not to have obsessions. So right now that I'm in the heat of this Eno obsession, I remember how fertile that mindset is, that to be activated by someone or something or groups of things. I could be obsessed with all kinds of things, and I have at moments, but to cultivate it a little more, to take a deep dive into something rather than just saying, oh yeah, I really am interested in that Lars Van Trier, say, that the Five Obstructions. But if I allowed myself to become more obsessed with it, all kinds of other things would start sticking to it. And, you get a deep dive and you start becoming excited about life. You start being excited about the world again. It re-enchants the world. Zunaid says, I used the quote when I was teaching film school. This is the nothing lasting was ever created without limitation. I learned the quote when I was teaching film school, had to inspire the students each semester when they complained about not having enough time or crew members, etc., that nothing lasting was created without limitation. Yeah, that's really interesting and true. But Jill's wondering where does the obsessive aspect come in? And there's just such a joy and it's like a hunger for more of that, please, to be, say, what obsessions did I have long ago? Oh, I had the Jim Morrison obsession, say, and I read everything about Jim and all those books about the Doors, and I read those lyrics, and I listened to the music, and fantasized about Jim and that world of the early 70s in LA, and the Lizard King and the Crystal Ship, and it inspired me in my feeling more the pulse of life. There's something about being a big fan of something and really digging in. And maybe you're already like that, and you don't need this at all. But as somebody who's a certain number of years old, that people like me really need their cage shaken a bit, and to rejoin the joy and the hungry mind, inquisitive mind, hungry mind, Bosena says. I need to replenish that in myself, because that's my most youthful self. When I feel like, I'm, the problem with being older is you get into that sort of been there, done that stage, and you gotta kind of regenerate the magic of living, the excitement of living, the curiosity, you know, I'd rather be that crazy person who just can't stop talking about Jim Morrison, or, or whatever the Ikebana or whatever the latest obsession is. I'd rather be that person than the person who's just going to tell you that same story of, you know, uh, what happened when they were 4 and what happened when they were 12. Yeah. I'm more interested in what I'm thinking about now than what my mother did to me when I was 8 or whatever. Uh, yeah, rattle the cage, or at least redesign it, Wendy says. Very good. Jill says, I usually think of obsession as being detrimental in some ways. That's interesting. I think that clinical obsession, like stalking or being so hopelessly in love with somebody that you can't do anything, it does tip over into a negative. But for those of us who want to shake the dust off and spark that interest in life and feel that hunger and feel that curiosity again, it's a challenge. If you tend to be obsessive, and we're not talking about obsessive compulsive, tapping and counting the buttons and that kind of thing. We're talking about like joyous obsession of, you can't get enough of that. Notice when you feel that little tug, give it another little tug, there's somebody on the internet who's doing something really interesting, and instead of going, oh, that's interesting, it's just like allow yourself to be a little more fascinated by that person and notice how it feels to be that, and carry that around a little bit, that you're still capable of falling in love with some random person on the internet, or some rock star artist. And I do go through obsessions, actually. I went through a Sam Francis, the painter Sam Francis, obsession for a while. There was an Ikebana show at a demonstration at a Sam Francis show at LACMA, the local art museum, LA County Art Museum. And I went for the Ikebana because I'm obsessed with Ikebana, which is the Japanese flower arranging. I love that shit. I love it. I joined a Ikebana society here. And I went in and I read up on San Francis and why Ikebana and with a San Francis show, and found out that he spent time in Japan, that his first stay in Japan was at an Ikebana school, the Sugetsu school, which is very modern and uses weird materials and stuff, and it was perfect for him. And he opened him up to all kinds of stuff. And then I started looking at Sam Francis, who I never really thought about. He's everywhere, he's colorful, any bit of it looks like any other bit of it. You might as well do a big Sam Francis and just cut it in pieces and sell it, I thought. But the more I read about him, fascinating person, the more I looked at his work and saw that, no, these are composed pieces. This is not random. And that he'll have a big empty space in the middle. There was a time where he did put his paint on the perimeter of the painting and left the center blank, which I always thought was really weird, and why would he do that? But I have taken Chinese brush painting, and I know about yin, and I see what he's doing is leaving the yin space in the center. And so the way he arranges the actual painting is the is a dialogue between the yin and the yang. And so suddenly I got it. And it stuck to other elements in my chi field that I already was interested in. So I had a big, long interest in Sam Francis, put him on the map for me. So looking for things like that, as opposed to obsessionality, like you don't want to get to the stalker phase. You can have a crush on somebody in your office and kind of be obsessed with them, but we're not talking about mental illness. We're not talking about clinical, obsession. And if you are obsessive compulsive, obviously this is not for you. This is more for the dusty, musty people, some of us somewhat older, who get into that been there, done that, not, do I want to go to a concert? I don't know, parking and all that. It's like, try to find that place where it is interesting. There are things that you can be excited about and allow yourself to be excited about. So Laura, hi Laura. Laura says, I'm currently obsessed with Egon Schiele after a trip to Eastern Europe. Yeah, Schiele. I never cared one way or the other about these, that particular era of German art. And then I got into Klimt and went to there's a gallery, a museum in New York, the Neue Gallery, which is German art. And I went to see the Klimt, and the Klimt has a lot of kind of, he was a really interesting cat and kind of I won't say new age, but for his time, visionary kind of person, and very sexy. And he has these pencil drawings that are so sexy. That's amazing. And he's known for all this color that he puts all over, like mosaic-y kind of color that he puts on his figures. The Kiss, is probably his most famous work. But when you look at how he develops those paintings, he paints them nude and then clothes them in all that color. It's fascinating. But then they had Schiele's in there as well as Klimt's, and I started looking at Schiele. These very skinny people, his artistic world were very hungry artists, and they're wonderful. And it really, I felt the work that I had been working, the book that I'd been working on was painted black, and my character, one of my characters was an artist. His girlfriend's an art model and very skinny. And he had like a Schiele-esque style. I mean, I recognized, as soon as I saw the Schiele, I said, oh my God, that's my character's art. It's like this. I mean, Schiele would have been an extremely important figure in his development. So once you magnetize the chi field, then this kind of stuff starts coming towards you. Melissa says, I read somewhere that writers have 3 major obsessions. And they do a deep dive in those topics. Everything they write relates to those. Not sure if that's true, but it is for me. That's interesting. 3 major obsessions. I have to think about that. I'm not sure if I have 3 major obsessions. They say that Picasso had 5 themes that he worked, almost every painting. He had 5 topics that he worked. The bullfight, the women, what else did he have? Well, he did still lives too. I don't know. I have to think about it. But I love the idea of cultivating or even noticing, like think about your obsessions, but notice when the chi field is like vibrating. For instance, I found out about that documentary, the documentary from the war. Laura said, yeah, Picasso. I found out about that documentary because I've been talking about nonstop since I've been reading that diary, and my husband saw an ad on Facebook for the documentary, and he would not necessarily have even stopped to take it into consciousness, but because he'd been hearing so much about he said, "Oh, there's an documentary. Let's go." So the chi field brought that in. Yeah, it was there all along, but it was my interest that's brought it in. So Melissa says her obsessions are tornadoes, orcas, or sharks, and nature. And I can see a tornado. Not only might you want to include tornadoes in your work, but you might think, how might I structure this story like a tornado? What would that be? So Bozena says, for her, war, circus, and pigeons. Is that you? Is that your obsessions? Or is that Picasso? Definitely Picasso had the circus too. Yeah. War, circus. He had the pigeons. He also had goats and stuff. Bull was his sort of emblem, right? He was like hyper masculine in his picture of self. Yeah, Picasso. Bullfight and weeping women, and guess who made them weep, and then painted a picture of them. And Melissa says, yes, mine begins with a tornado representing me running away as a teen. So tornadoes move. They whirl, and they just like tear apart everything they come in contact with. So I would say, see if you can work up a good obsession or two. Take a look at the site and check out that oblique, what is it? Oblique solutions? Oblique. Let's see. I put it as a favorite because I want to return and return and return to it. Oblique strategies. See if you can see that film. See if you can see the 5 obstructions. Read up on Life a User's Manual and the games people play on the page. Amazing. Nobody goes as far as Georges Perec. And try for think about framing and how things are framed as opposed to the content. And we'll see you next week for Writing Wednesday. Thank you for joining me. Bye.